Good morning, everybody. It's Thursday, November 7th, 5:26 a.m. Central Time. Grain markets are higher this morning. December corn futures up 1 at 427 and a quarter. January soybeans up 7 and a quarter at 10.11. December Chicago wheat up 4 and 3/4 at 578. December Kansas City wheat up 2.5 at 576 and a half. December spring wheat up 2 and a quarter at 607 and 3/4. Let's revisit the election and markets.
Alrighty, so Donald Trump's return to the White House is bringing uncertainty to agricultural trade. Worries over a potential trade war with China caused the grain markets to plummet early on Wednesday. However, they were able to recover later in the day. During Trump's first term, U.S. soybean shipments to China declined by roughly 79% after he imposed tariffs on certain Chinese goods. In recent months, Trump has proposed a 10 to 20% tariff on all imported goods into the U.S. and a 60% tariff on Chinese goods. The majority of farmers, however, support Trump's return to the White House. Farmers are looking for a change as the ag economy faces challenges from high input costs, lower prices, and rising equipment expenses.
So big turn of events yesterday into today. The soybean market, the knee-jerk reaction was we're going to sell soybeans because Trump's elected, right? And that knee-jerk reaction proved, at least to this point, to be wrong because the soybean market came back and closed higher yesterday. So the trade and whoever was trading soybeans off of the election got this wrong, apparently, for the moment. I'd argue that this action's pretty good. I mean, we've been able to avoid, to this point, a test of those August lows in this January soybean contract. We're back above $10 this morning. The thing is this is part of it. The book of sales to China already is trade war-ish to some extent. Chinese purchases of U.S. soybeans are the third worst of the last 10 years. Only 2018 and 2019 were worse. During 2018 and 2019, China also had African swine fever, which enabled them to avoid U.S. soybeans. So there were two things going on at that time frame. Yeah, the trade war was a big part of it, but African swine fever was a big part of it as well. I think that as it relates to U.S. soybean export sales, the trade is aware that China is going to back off and was probably going to back off in either case. Maybe they back off more or back off entirely if we get into another trade war, which looks probable. Other global buyers, however, have stepped up to fill the gap to some extent. Our book of soybean sales could be enough to hit current USDA projections, but there's still a lot of unknowns here. We don't know exactly. We think there's going to be a trade war, but what's the time frame? When does Trump slap the tariffs on? Is it day one? Is it 2 months in? Is it a year in? What does China do to retaliate? We don't really know, but I think the trade got this wrong. The corn market reacted very well yesterday. We actually had kind of like an upside looking breakout on the corn chart. Now we could just go up to maybe that high from earlier in October and maybe back off, but looks a hell of a lot better. This is not the reaction that people expected following a Trump victory, but here we are and we'll take it, right?
Definitely. South Dakota has voted to repeal a carbon pipeline law. About 60% of the state's population voted to repeal RL 21, a law designed to regulate how counties manage carbon pipelines within the state. The decision is a major setback for the construction of Summit Carbon's pipeline across South Dakota. Those in favor of the law claim it would have served as a compromise between landowners and pipeline projects. Opponents of the law argued that it was a seizure of local authority and criticized it further for not addressing eminent domain. Summit plans to reapply for a permit in South Dakota later this month. However, the repeal of the law will make it more difficult for Summit to obtain approval.
One Republican state lawmaker from South Dakota said this. This is a mandate from the voters that South Dakota is not for sale. They understand that our property rights are sacred and that the legislature got it wrong. Now we move forward to enact much needed protections. Summit put a statement out. This was on Twitter. Summit Carbon Solutions will apply for a permit in South Dakota on November 19th. Our focus continues to be working with landowners to ensure the long-term viability of ethanol and agriculture in the state. Projects like ours have successfully navigated South Dakota's existing regulatory landscape in the past. We will continue to operate within the current framework, knowing that the future of ethanol and agriculture is vital to our shared success. So even though they were shot down, they're going to try again. Premium subs, Pete Meyer is going to be on today. We're going to talk about this in much greater detail. That video will be out later this morning.
Trump's presidential victory caused the dollar index and Bitcoin to surge on Wednesday. The dollar index rose 1.7% to 105.09, its highest level since the first week of July. The increase was attributed to Trump's policies on illegal immigration, lower taxes, and new tariffs. The policy shift is expected to boost U.S. growth and inflation. Global currencies, such as the euro and the yuan, fell sharply in anticipation of Trump's policies. With the Republican victory in the Senate and the strong probability of gaining control of the House, larger currency moves are expected. Bitcoin also saw impressive gains yesterday, surpassing $75,000 and setting an all-time high.
Start off with the dollar. The Eurozone, Mexico, China, and Canada are viewed as being at risk of potential new tariffs, which may hurt economic growth in the regions that would widen their interest rate differentials with the United States and weigh on their currencies. So Trump is bullish the dollar. The dollar, at least the dollar index, is still kind of in a range, but toward the very upper end of this kind of wedge pattern we've been in for the better part of 2 years. And maybe you see a breakout here. The U.S. dollar almost posted a fresh all-time high versus the Brazilian real yesterday, which is noteworthy considering that Brazil is our big competition. So, yeah, I mean, the pro-USA stuff that Trump has out here is definitely friendly to the dollar. Bitcoin is interesting. I know you guys hate it, but I like it, so I'm going to talk about it. Fresh all-time highs. It's a bull flag breakout. Senator Cynthia Lummis from Wyoming, I believe, has this bill that's been floating out there, and I think it's called the Bitcoin Act of 2024. She wants to establish a United States strategic Bitcoin reserve, and the proposal is that the U.S., over a period of 5 years, acquire 1 million Bitcoins in total. The United States government's already sitting on 200,000 that were confiscated, and she and I believe Trump is not necessarily totally on board, but has absolutely considered this, is what I've read and have been told. Is maybe interested here. And if think about this, if this is actually being considered and other countries think that, wait a minute, if the U.S. is going to start buying Bitcoin when Trump gets into office, are we going to buy it before they do during the next 3 months? Maybe that's a possibility. Maybe I'm crazy. I've got laser eyes in my Twitter photo. It's more of a troll than anything because people hate it so much, but I like it. So whatever.
If you guys haven't checked out our premium content, you sure need to check it out. Joe, can you tell me about yesterday's premium video with Brian Split?
Brian Split was on yesterday. We did charts as we do every other Wednesday, and we sent the video out early because there was some timely stuff, and Brian absolutely nailed one thing in particular. Post-election volatility. Some of the charts are pretty interesting here. We covered the grain stuff, but also covered some of the outside markets that were moving because of the election stuff. In today's premium video, Pete Meyer is going to be on. Got a whole bunch of questions about biofuels, policy implications as a result of the election, a whole bunch of different market type items as it relates to the election. A lot's changed this week, and a lot is going to change when it comes to that. If you want to see the premium stuff, go to standardgrain.com. You can sign up this morning. It's a $50 per month subscription. You can cancel at any time. No other fee, no other obligation. Nobody will try to sell you anything else. You can sign up on your phone. It's a piece of cake. Credit card, Apple Pay, Google Pay, Cash App. Everything is easily accessible on your phone. The email can be read on your phone. The videos are one click to play. There's no login instructions. Super, super easy to do. Check that deal out this morning, guys.
The stock market soared on Wednesday in the wake of Donald Trump's decisive victory. All three indexes set record highs. The Dow Jones rose 3.6%, the S&P 500 2.5%, and the NASDAQ 3%. U.S. Treasury yields also surged as the 10-year Treasury yield rose to a 4-month high of 4.48%. The VIX, Wall Street's fear gauge, fell to a 6-week low of 16.27. The Federal Reserve is expected to cut interest rates by 0.25 percentage point at the end of their meeting today. Traders, however, have lowered their expectations regarding the likelihood of a rate cut in December, as well as the anticipated number of reductions projected for next year.
All-time high in the stock market, absolutely phenomenal performance. And for the moment, the gains have been able to hold. So it's not just a knee jerk, at least not for the moment. I'll be very curious to see what happens with the Fed today. I think they're going to cut today, but Powell's going to do a press conference afterwards. And somebody's going to ask him about Trump, because Trump has expressed his interest in the past in perhaps having some control over the interest rate situation. I don't know if that's a good idea, but in any case, how does Powell answer that question when it's brought up inevitably? And the markets are so sensitive to everything that comes out of that guy's mouth. Depending on how he answers it, you could see a lot of things move in a lot of directions. It's pretty interesting stuff. I'll be very curious to see what happens with that later today.
U.S. ethanol production increased for the sixth consecutive week last week. Weekly output of 1.1 million barrels per day was up 2.1% on the week and up 5% versus the same week last year. Ethanol stocks were pegged at 22.02 million barrels. The print was up 1.1% compared to the previous week and up 4.8% compared to the same week last year. Implied gasoline demand was down 3.6% compared to the previous week, but up 1.5% versus the same week last year. On average, over the last 4 weeks, implied U.S. gasoline demand is up 1% compared to the same period last year.
Pace of ethanol production is actually slightly better than 3% above last year now. I had this slide last week, and I'll show it to you again. If we're able to maintain a pace of 3% above last year, that's an extra 185 million bushels of additional demand versus USDA's current projection. Now, the margins have backed off a little bit, and I don't expect that we'll stay 3% or better above last year's pace. But what if we could stay 1.5% above last year's pace and add, 90 million bushels to of demand to the balance sheet? I think that's possible. And maybe USDA addresses some of this demand stuff. Ethanol and corn exports also been very strong. Maybe they address that stuff tomorrow. We'll do a report preview tomorrow morning. What did cattle do yesterday?
Cattle futures were higher. Live cattle were 65 cents to $1.35 higher. Feeders were $1.15 to $2.20 higher. Box beef was lower. Choice ended the day at $315.59. That was down $1.62. Select ended the day at $283.20. That was down $2.04.
Outside markets very quiet this morning, especially relative to yesterday. U.S. dollars off just a little bit. Stocks are marginally higher. Bonds are off a little bit. Gold's down $3. Got hammered yesterday. Crude oil is down 89 cents at 70.80 in the December WTI. Have a great day, guys. We'll talk to you Friday.